online. This is our second session of this academic year, and we have two great presentations for today. So we have Siren Johnston, who's the Executive Director of the LLM Program in Compliance and Regulation at the University of Hong Kong, who will discuss his thinking on financial regulation of crypto assets. And then we have John Tredenik, the CEO and founder of Merlin Search Technologies, who will talk about AI-powered search for analytics and review of legal documents. So before we get started, does anyone have any news to share with the group? Any updates? If so, please speak up or share it through the chat.
Hey, Roland, Bruce.
Yes, Bruce, over to you.
In a crazy way, I've seen that there's a broken part of the legal system that we hadn't actually talked about ever, which is the way in which trust beneficiaries learn about the rights that they have that may have been trampled on in the handling of the trust. And so I just wanted to, I could go into great detail, but suffice it to say, and it's good to see some stuff in the chat, that this is a sleeping giant of a problem, given the amount of wealth transfer that will go to the next generation in a few years, and the trusts that hold it today and may have been mishandled, and the beneficiaries that don't know what they're doing with it. So be really happy to talk to anybody about this and my own bumping into it, which I didn't expect to, courtesy of my father.
Thanks. I think, we're good to talk to our old friend and former CodeX fellow, Jason Brewster, who started a business in the space called Fair Document, and he's been working closely with trusts and estates attorneys, trying to empower them with technology. But I'm certainly happy to make the connection.
Yeah, that would be great, Roland, because I think this is also a matter as we lead up to crypto, talking about old money, really old money, and how it's been handled and really been pretty opaque and unaccountable from the point of view of a beneficiary who may not have seen anything until years later and have to try to reconstruct it. So be happy to.
It's an interesting use case also for blockchain applications. I think that'd be really interesting.
For sure.
Good. Okay. Thanks, Bruce. That's a cool idea. I think
Of course.
If anyone in the group has any suggestions, please chime in, and otherwise, we should reach out to Jason Brewster and see if he could perhaps give us an update on that space and have a little discussion with us. All right, good. Well, I see some folks share. So I think Shugam shared publication. Congratulations! Thank you for that link on a recent publication of Dr. Sharma, and then I will just turn it over to Siren. Siren, are you there?
I am. Hi, Roland.
Hey, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks very much for inviting me along today. Shall I get my share screen up?
Yes, please.
Let me find it.
Wonderful. Okay, well, over to you, Siren. It's great to have you.
Okay, well, hi, Roland, and hi, everyone. Thanks. Thanks very much for inviting me along to speak today. It's a real pleasure to speak to you all. As Roland already mentioned, I'm Siren Johnston, and I'm at the University of Hong Kong From 2016 to 2021, I was a member of the financial advisory group of our securities regulator here, or our financial regulator. They have a financial advisory group dealing with fintech, and that was from 2016 to 2021. By training, I'm a lawyer, and after that I was working in corporate finance, but before that I was actually at Oxford doing a DPhil in neuroscience, so I had a bit of a career shift in the meantime. Now, as to my talk today, I think it goes without saying that many people on the technology side of the industry and quite a few on the professional side have been surprised at the approach that regulators such as the SEC have taken toward crypto assets. As I speak, in Europe, they are pushing towards something called a markets in crypto assets, which is premised on a mindset which is preoccupied with financial stability and payment systems, monetary policy, and so on. So today I'm going to talk about the regulation of crypto assets and why I think it's taken the wrong path. This is something I've written about at length in a book, which is coming out later this month. And for reasons that will become clear later, rather than using the term blockchain, I use the word cryptographic consensus technology, or CC tech. And as I say, CC tech, and why I prefer to use that word in this context, at least, will become clear as we go along. At the end, I'm going to conclude with some proposals that I think put us on a footing which are consistent with better industry development, as well as the social objectives of regulation. Now, I essentially have two current concerns at the back of this book. The first is the general position that it's appropriate to apply one form or another of financial regulation to crypto assets, what I have called the standard narrative. I believe that policymakers have too quickly grabbed onto a fit to existing regulation taxonomy that's precluded thinking about how we might respond differently to CC tech. So things put in pre-made boxes, if you want to think of it that way. The second concern is what kind of ecosystem the standard narrative is de facto encouraging. We might ask ourselves, what different kinds of exploration of blockchain technology might we have without the standard narrative? What are the different influences on shaping the ecosystem? Are we getting more or less polymorphism in the ecosystem as a result of these regulatory approaches? Both concerns are positioned in the context of what I call the new prospect. This is a term that I've coined as a way of capturing all of the possibilities of CC tech without committing to its final shape. As many of you will know, in the mid-1980s, it began to be recognized that information technology would change how markets and economic activity is undertaken, and traditional hierarchies would be disrupted. On the slide here, I've identified a few main themes, and under any version, the new prospect refers to the possible range of possibilities that CC tech creates for new kinds of commercial relationships, new kinds of institutional arrangements, and community interactions in the context of a crypto economy. So the new prospect can be contrasted to the extant ways of doing things, the old prospect. So in this regard, I distinguish for these purposes CC tech implementations that merely provide, for example, more efficient ways of undertaking existing commercial practices. So with that orientation in hand, the question is this: how does the standard narrative interact with the new prospect? This can be expressed in the formula that you have here on the slide, which is effectively saying what is the probability of the new prospect if we do the standard narrative. Now, the standard narrative is a product of a few dynamics. Firstly, we'll all remember the Wild West days of the ICO boom. Regulators were concerned about de-risking and consumer protection. So the standard narrative calmed that ICO splurge, but it also resulted in changed concepts. So the STOs and the SAFT structures that we had subsequently represented conformity to the precepts of the standard narrative. That is, familiar capital raising structures that reaffirm the segregation of capital provider, capital manager, and product consumer. But there's another more important dynamic that's working here. Policymakers rely on prior knowledge and experience as tools for coping with new challenges, and CC Tech and ICOs were certainly a new challenge. They use inferences about novel situations by using what's already known. However, experience and prior expectations can also affect how we react to the new. So psychologists call this predictive inference. This is the adding of information that overwrites actual data. Any ensuing prediction errors can result in either just ignoring the new data or updating the predictions. So as you can see from the Charlie Chaplin mask here, our expectation that facial features are convex overwrites the actual data of the hollow mask. So how a problem is understood affects the resolution of policy. And more fundamentally, the standard narrative is a product of policymakers applying an incremental approach to how they think about the problems presented by a new technology. Regulatory incrementalism comes with benefits and drawbacks. It performs quite well when change is gradual, but when change is not gradual, incrementalism actually doesn't work that well. And I think it's clear enough that to most of us, CC Tech is something significantly different from what we had until relatively recently. So what I did was to look at, well, what are the underlying assumptions of the standard narrative? In my book, I consider 15 different underlying assumptions of financial regulation that I think are challenged by the changed fact patterns presented by CC Tech. In fact, from the point of view of the technology or the technologist, there's nothing incremental about the application of the standard narrative. It was dramatic. It was a tectonic event. So let me give you 3 examples of changed fact patterns. The first is one that I think we're all very familiar with, the underlying assumption of securities regulation that there is always an actor who is by nature centralized. That is often no longer the case. The legal problems associated with decentralized networks and accountability is, I think, very well known. The second example is the false idea that once a token has been categorized as a security, then the objectives of securities regulation have been fulfilled and everything's okay. Except it's not, because the regulations developed with traditional securities in mind just don't apply properly. For example, regulations applying to stockbrokers have stopped them from handling crypto assets in most parts of the world. The United States SEC is now talking about special purpose broker dealers. If the crypto asset's characterized as a collective investment of some sort, it's not sensible to apply public fund regulation to have it authorized. And if we look at market abuse regulations that apply to publicly tradable securities, then they too are often inapplicable. So consumers who are looking at that is consumers who have acquired crypto assets who are looking at securities laws for protection may come away disappointed. The third example is that laws apply to securities, not the other way around. Securities are subject to law in a very passive manner. But with CC Tech, we can actually build regulatory mechanisms into the products of the technology so that a crypto asset becomes self-governing as regards things like compliance and self-reporting, as regards events of interest to relevant stakeholders. Of course, there's a whole bundle of assumptions and technical problems concerning the application of the Howey test, which I review in the book in some detail, but I won't get into here. So I think we're at a stage where questions need to be asked about the consequences of the standard narrative that have not been asked, or at least not looked at hard enough. First, has the standard narrative actually de-risked the industry? Today, we're looking at the market a market that is highly speculative, subject to manipulative practices and abuse. And of course, DeFi is booming in a space that's largely unregulated and subject to a number of potentially difficult legal issues. Then, of course, there's the NFT story. How has the standard narrative shaped ecosystem development? Instead of a more polymorphic ecosystems along the lines of the new prospect I introduced before, we've seen an intensification of CC Tech being used to create financial products. So there's good reasons to question whether the standard narrative has been successful or not. And in my book, I make 5 proposals. I'm going to focus on the first 2 here, as I think they're the most interesting to discuss later. And I will briefly discuss the other 3 before finishing up. Okay, so the first 2 proposals represent what I call the determined by architecture, or DBA framework. This is summarized in the figure here. And as you'll see right off here, why I use the term CC Tech. The 3 axes here on the cube represent important enabling concepts of the technology. Thinking about the technology from the point of view of these enabling concepts, and these are the ones that I've put forward in the book, and as I point out, there may be others that I haven't thought of, or these might not be the right ones. The point is that we're trying to change the level of how we think about regulating crypto assets. So it's kind of analogous to moving from the examination of a molecule down to moving to an examination of the atomic elements that form molecules. This gives rise to different kinds of observations and learnings and applications. Importantly, it has the prospect, I think, of delivering a more sustainable regulatory framework, as novel ways of configuring these atomic elements are found and put to new use cases. And by the way, the axes that I have here, they don't need to be linear. This is another thing which I need to explore a little bit further as I discuss in the book. The other item here is the sphere in the middle, and this reflects what I have identified as the internal and external dimensions of any CC Tech iteration. The internal dimension you can think of as being the infrastructure of the code itself, technically defined parameters that determine the characteristic of a cryptographically secure consensus mechanism. However, that internal dimension ultimately needs to act with human behavior. People have different expectations as to how tokens or nodes work. They try to game the system. They might cooperate in groups, or stigmergy might emerge. Or a law might be applied that then affects behavior. And all of this is captured by the external dimension. So the question then is, well, how does this DBA framework help us? And here you can see a table with some of the examples of the different kinds of questions that we can use this framework for to interrogate any particular CC Tech iteration. It helps us to shift the level of analysis away from labels applied to things exchanged, things like information, capital, services, rights, permissions. And instead it brings focus to the genesis and the nature of the being established between two or more persons, i.e. how the relationship operates in practice. So this introduces bottom-up considerations to regulating the technology as opposed to fit to existing regulations, which the industry is having to deal with at the moment. The other three proposals, I'll try to very briefly run through them now, but they're all really concerned with how institutional oversight is applied. First, we need to develop better high-level principles. Let me begin with two mantras that I find repeatedly annoying because I think they're decoys to what we should be thinking about. The first mantra is the same business, same risks, same rules mantra, typically heard from the traditional business sector. The other is the technology neutrality mantra, frequently heard in regulatory circles, though less often observed in practice. I think these are decoys because what we're talking about with CC Tech when we're thinking about the new prospect is that it is all about the technology. Technology neutrality does not imply technology agnosia. We're dealing with something which is quite different from the kinds of things we've the standard narrative is capable of envisaging. This is another reason why I think we need to move the regulatory perspective down a level to the enabling concepts, as I've outlined in the DBA framework. The fourth proposal at present is about the at present, the regulatory ordering of CC Tech comes from the standard narrative and SROs that mainly work within that standard narrative construct. The prospect of writing self-executing regulatory mechanisms into tokens can align with the objectives of social regulation. Now, I'm not saying here the objectives of the standard narrative. I'm saying the objectives, much larger objectives about why oversight regulation in society, as a matter of fact, exists, and we will have to cope with it, as I mentioned in the fifth proposal. But at the moment, there's no commercial or regulatory motivation to actually write stuff like that into into a particular CC Tech iteration. Finally, I've also proposed institutional reform, as I don't think securities regulators are the right people to look at the technology. They are limited by their own DNA. In my book, I've provided an example of using privacy laws. So if private data could be freely mined, packaged, and sold in open markets, theoretically, you could actually govern private data using securities regulation. And if you just look within the context of securities regulation, one could be satisfied that you're meeting the stated objectives, but you'd completely miss the point of protecting people's private data. The fifth and final proposal that I've suggested is that we need to change where we are at the moment. We actually need action from the G20. The G20's voice was needed for things like credit rating agencies and OTC derivatives, when problems in those industry sectors had been known about for well over a decade. However, the problem with the G20 at the moment, if you look at their statements, is that whenever they're referring to this technology, they're always referring to it in a financial context. So I still don't think they've got the point. So next steps, this brings me to the very final bit of the talk, and it's very much the part of the purpose for me in this talk to reach out for potential collaborators on these two items. So please do get in touch. Dealing with each, counterfactual reasoning begins with the question, what if something had been otherwise than what has actually happened? And my question is this: what if the standard narrative had never been applied to crypto assets? What would be the characteristics of crypto assets in the markets today? Would the markets still look the same? Would they still be speculative? Would they still have the heavy financial characteristic that they do? Is it possible, as indicated in the formula at the bottom left of the page there, is it possible that the standard narrative has actually increased risk by driving development to financial use cases? The public tend to lump everything from Bitcoin to Ethereum to Dogecoin into the same speculative basket. This is obviously a somewhat controversial proposition, but there is some reasoning behind it that at present is it more conceptual than quantitative. So hence the need for collaboration in an area where, frankly, I lack the necessary mathematical expertise in counterfactual reasoning to proceed with that alone. As for the DVA framework, I've expanded in the book how it can provide a useful heuristic tool to reframe thinking and may be able to provide new perspectives. And I've provided some examples of how it can do that, but it's something that's in need of further development and testing. So I'm going to leave you here with this quote from Charles Lindblom. He's one of the fathers of incrementalism, and as I think that this is what we need at this particular point in time. So thank you very much for listening, and I will now open to discussion. Back to you, Roland.
Thank you, Siren. Wonderful. And we have just a little bit of time for questions because I want to leave some time for our next speaker too. But I see Bruce has his hand up. But before I turn it over to Bruce, can you just summarize in one sentence what is the traditional narrative that you refer to?
Well, and standard narrative.
Yeah, the standard narrative. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the standard narrative is effectively what the most of you, I think, are in the United States, and you'll be familiar with how the SEC has applied the Howey test to crypto assets, right? So this is the financial regulation narrative that it's okay to do that, and that it works and it's sustainable and it's beneficial, okay, so you look at kind of the suits that we've had against companies like Telegram and Ripple, and there are many other class action lawsuits floating around. So one can look at that standard narrative from the point of view of saying, oh, hey, look, it's possible to apply it. But that's not the real question. The real question, I think, is it meaningful to apply it? Does it actually help in the ways that it is supposed to be helping? In terms of, say, objectives like de-risking, which I think is fine, objectives like consumer protection, which I think is fine, but also objectives like helping to bring the technology forward into the spaces where it is capable of being in terms of the public market.
Got it. Thank you. Bruce, you have a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Siren, when you've looked back in economic history over the last 200 years, let's say, and you're trying to make sure that a new technology doesn't quash the innovations, if you will, that would otherwise be unleashed if you overregulated it. The thing that came to mind for me was the agriculture commodities and how, at least in the States, the Commodity Futures Trading Act and Commission is all regulated under the Department of Agriculture still, not SEC, not the Fed. And this relates to some work I'm doing to create a space commodities exchange. So when you've looked at a healthy development, if you will, of regulation, what precedent in economic history do you think of as being the analogy for where crypto should be taken through the regulatory process?
Yeah, that's a thanks, Bruce. That's a good question. And as you point out, part of the problems that we're facing here is we need structural reform. We need to understand regulators' DNA, where they're coming from, and we need to find a way to redirect. But in terms of your 200 plus years of economic history, I do actually devote a chapter in the book to talking about how things happening in society have actually changed the way we go about doing things. And one of them that many of you may be familiar with is the history of the corporate. Corporates used to be by royal charter. At that time, business activity was somehow always for the purposes of the state. And as we move toward the Industrial Revolution, business activity increasingly became, well, it's for private purposes. And so the right to incorporate came about. And so if you then look at the history of the corporate itself, the kind of rights and things you can do within a corporate actually changed. We talk these days about things like one share, one vote, but it wasn't always like that. It used to be one shareholder, one vote. So if you look at, let's say, US Supreme Court cases like Reeves, their understanding of the characteristics of securities are not the same as what they are today. The question of what is a security is that's been debated in the US Supreme Court and in academia for many decades. What is underlying these kinds of changes, though, ultimately, is what's happening in society. One of the things that I do take some inspiration from is Thomas and North's approach to looking at the factors in successful economies, and that is to have an appropriate legal system that reflects the values of that particular society. And I think that if you are looking at this from the point of view of where we are at the moment in the technology, so blockchain technology today, you do have this increasing body of people who are looking for decentralized alternatives, different ways of doing things in a community that were not possible previously. And so one of the things that I really think that we need to start thinking about and doing is looking at, as I said before, the institutional structures which are regulating our activities, and how we can try to do better to facilitate the aspirations of people to connect to each other in different ways on a decentralized basis using this kind of technology. And guess what? It doesn't always have to be characterized by some kind of financial/securities regulation kind of activity.
Well, thank you for speaking to us from Dr. Strangelove's lair.
Well spotted.
Thank you, Siren. There's another question from Thabo in the chat, but I was hoping that maybe you can answer it in the chat because you're already a little bit over time.
Yeah.
and it's wonderful to have you. I think we need to do a follow-up conversation. I think there's so much to discuss also about the role of self-regulation in those communities that you describe. And we could easily fill another hour with conversation. It's really fascinating. First of all, thank you so much for your time and sharing your thinking about crypto regulation, and congratulations on your book. And please keep us posted, and hopefully we can continue the conversation soon. And perhaps, I know you had your slide up with your contact info, but if you could maybe drop it in the chat, your contact info, that would be great too. Thank you again, Siren.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Roland. I'll do all that. I see a couple of questions in the chat, and I will type in a response
Fantastic.
as we go along. Thanks so much. Bye.
Really appreciate it. Thank you, Siren. All right, thank you. And then over to John. John, are you there?
I'm there, Roland. Let's see if we can start my video.
Hey, good to
Can
see
you hear me?
again. Yes.
Good. I'll turn on sharing as well, and we'll get going. I am John Tredenick, the founder and CEO of Merlin Search Technologies, and I'm excited to show you, and many for the first time in the world, Sherlock, our AI-powered digital document bloodhound. Sherlock is a machine learning algorithm that's taking keyword search, in my view, to a new level. In brief, we've integrated keyword and algorithmic search into a single seamless search experience. I'll show you today how it works and why I think it'll be a game changer for finding information in large document populations. But by way of introduction, I'm in the third phase of my career. I spent my first almost 25 years as a trial lawyer and a partner with a national law firm in the United States. I then founded Catalyst Repository Systems out of the law firm, and we became a leading e-discovery search software company. Grew it to about 180 people with offices and data centers worldwide. In January of 2019, we sold Catalyst. I retired for lunch and then decided I was too young to retire, and started Merlin Search Technologies. My goal was to build the next generation of search tools. We built on three propositions that drive us. The first is to build a new platform from scratch using the latest, primarily open source technologies, and to write our code around it. The second was to build it cloud native at its core, so we could take advantage of the kind of power that a secure public cloud offers. That could be a separate talk. But third, and more important, was to develop a new, more powerful algorithmic search application that we could integrate seamlessly with traditional keyword search. And the result's what I'm going to show you today. Merlin integrated search, and Sherlock, the first AI-powered digital bloodhound. And our focus will be on Sherlock himself, Sherlock Hound. So how it works in brief, and this is a one-slide presentation, is this simple. Start with a keyword search. Find a good document of any type. And you don't even have to use search. But when you find something good, you send it to Sherlock. Sherlock will, in an instant, analyze the document, build an AI model, you'll see this, rank all the other documents, and bring you more good documents. As it finds them, you simply guide Sherlock with a thumbs up or thumbs down. It indeed works like Pandora Internet Radio, only it finds great documents rather than great music. So I'm going to shift to, I'll have to stop sharing and turn it on again, no problem. I'm going to shift to our platform. I'm not going to spend much time on the platform, but I want to show you how Sherlock works. So imagine we have about 2 million documents in this platform, and about 1 million, 8 or 9 are emails from Governor Jeb Bush during his 2 terms as governor of Florida. He made these available. We harvested them to use. Now, these documents, some of you might know, we regularly used in the text retrieval conferences, the annual ones put on by NIST, worldwide conference by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They had about 300,000 of these documents, and we at Catalyst, my old company, and a lot of academics and some other vendors would try out our algorithms to see if we could find the relevant documents. They had about 35 topics that we compete against, and they had tagged all the documents. So we got those same documents to use both for our testing and for demonstrations, only there were really 2 million of them, and there are 2 million roughly on the site, 1.9 million. So one of the topics, and we'll do 3, but one of the topics for fun was to find documents regarding the debate to protect the manatees. And many of you from the United States will know manatees are walrus-like creatures, many in Florida, that some feared were becoming extinct. And so there was a debate about taking steps to protect them. The problem, and what made that a particularly difficult search for all the algorithms, was there's also a county in Florida called Manatee County. So the challenge was, could you find through your algorithm the documents about the manatee animal versus the county? And that's what we set out to do here. So just for fun and to get started, I'm not going to do a hard search, but a simple one. This is keyword, and I'm going to search for manatee. Now, again, we're using Elastic. We're searching through about 2 million documents, and we find a number of them. And if you can see the screen, if this is a typical grid results page, you could look and see legal trade with Cuba, Board of Dentistry appointment, and one might deduce that these are about Manatee County. You also see manatee protection, and you might deduce that these are about the manatees, the documents of interest. So in a keyword world, as you must know, the problems are you get too many of what you don't want and not enough of what you want, and there are very few tools to distinguish between them. So what you can do in a keyword world is jump in, and you see the first document we found is manatee doctors forced out. It's easy to say we're not looking for that, and our choice is to move on. So we move to a second document out of the 147,000 that we've got here. And this one's about a job and somebody doing a great job for Manatee County. It's another miss. This is what happens. Now, by chance, on this third document, we see something about the incidental taking of Florida manatees. And if we read down, we see there's talk about a proposed dock moratorium, why it won't be a good thing for either the property owners or the manatees. And you can quickly see that this is a good document, one that is on topic for this debate about protecting the manatees. So in a keyword world, you have a few options here, one of which would be the classic, we'll copy it to a folder and copy more, and we'll come back to it later and analyze it. You could, if you want to tag the documents, I put a tag in here for fun about manatee protection, or your third option would be to read this and see things like dock and dock moratorium, and to go back and build a more robust search. Dock within this much of manatee, manatee near beach or propeller, not manatee near county. And most of us, because this is the only tools we had, knew these were our alternatives, and we got through it. In Search 2.0, which is what we're building, we have another option, which is, we like this document, why don't we send it to Sherlock? So when I click send to Sherlock, it's going to give me a choice, two choices really that are optional, but I'll do it this time. We'll skip it the next. The first is, do we want to name our session? And sure, I will name it the CodeX Manatee Investigation. Why might we do that? Because we're going to track everything you look at and find, and you can come back to this session, others can use it, and you can work together and collaborate on effectively training Sherlock. And the second choice would be to put your good documents in a folder. And I've made one on Protect the Manatee, so I'll do that. Now, at this point, when I click Submit, Sherlock is going to take this document, analyze it, determine what are the important concepts and terms in it, build an AI model around it, then apply it to 2 million documents we have on the site, analyze them, rank them, bring back the top document, and bring back the key terms. And the question we might ask is, how long should it take to do that once I've clicked Submit, which I have? The answer is about this long. We can do this in about 100 milliseconds. And I'll tell you, by way of comparison, we had a similar kind of algorithm at Catalyst that pioneered what we call continuous active learning, and it would take 8 to 10 minutes to do that. The TAR 1.0 products before that would take 8 hours. We can do it in 100 milliseconds. We can do 10 million documents in 1 second. And you can see on the screen that we found a good document, one that's similar. We like it, so let's click thumbs up and see what Sherlock can do. Sherlock is built with no memory, so each time it's doing all that work again, taking now the 2 documents for training, building a model, and finding more documents. And you can see that we put it at the top, CodeX Manatee investigation. So far, 2 positives, we'll make it 3. And it just starts bringing these back. This is another one about 51 manatee deaths. We'll just keep going. But as we find documents that maybe aren't as good, and this one looks good, we can then give it a thumbs down. And in fact, Sherlock can get off the track. This might be a good example here. Somebody's building a doc, there's not much to it. On property, cross over my property. This is about docs, which is important, but we're not interested in that. So we'll give it a thumbs down and tell Sherlock that we're on the wrong track. And you can see Sherlock is back on to this doc moratorium and keeps on the trail because it's pretty darn good at finding these documents. Now, as we're going along, we can click on key terms and see the terms that Sherlock thinks are most important. I present these in a word cloud, which everybody is going to know about because I like them. Some of my scientists didn't, but the size tells you something about Sherlock's ranking. We also can present it in a list view where we pull out the top 30, somewhat arbitrary terms. And we've had a beta program going since March. And a lot of the beta users said, hey, we want to tell Sherlock, for example, that manatees, I only searched on the word manatee. Remember, that's the only word we gave him. But these are important. And maybe Sawjik, Wan, or Let's are not so important. So we call it boosting or suppressing. And we can send those signals because the next document will be a total rebuild of what we're looking for. And it will take into account, we'll see it right here, that manatees are very important and these other terms will disappear. So that is what I call version 1 of Sherlock. We can exit, even tag it and give it a thumbs down, but we're on version 5. I'm going to show you 3 kind of ways that Sherlock revolutionizes search. But when you exit, you come back to the exact doc you were on in keyword, and you're free now to stop, finish your search, come back the next day, start a new search, or do what you do in the keyword, which is let's go back and see what's next on the keyword. Now, by chance, because there weren't that many, we do find another one about manatees, 95 manatees killed. Remember, the only keyword we gave it was manatee. So why don't we go back with these to Sherlock? Now, we could start a new session if we wanted, but why don't we just jump into the one we created so that this document now adds to the training, adds to the count. And as you can see, it continues to go find good documents. So version 1 of Sherlock, and I'm going to exit, is about 1-to-1. Find some good information, a good document, we can send it up, and you can see the speed at which we can do that. But that's just version 1. We're on 5. I'm just going to quickly show you versions 2 and 3, and I can tell you more about the others. But imagine if we went to our folders and there's Sherlock investigation, and we had, protecting the manatees, and we built a folder of documents. Wouldn't it be nice if instead of finding one of these documents and letting Sherlock loose, we could just tag them all and send them to Sherlock? Now, Sherlock's going to analyze, I didn't check the count, 30 documents, build a model, apply that to the 2 million, and bring you back the next document. A very, very powerful algorithm. But Sherlock 2 is any folder you can jump in, but let's have some fun with what I call Sherlock 3. So why not start with a search? And this is a fun one. It's a different topic. Another one of the topics we all competed on was about a rum called Havana Club and a trademark battle between Bacardi and Cuba and Pernod, the French distiller. And the issue was to find documents showing that Bacardi was lobbying Bush to interfere in the trademark battle. There was a claim that Bacardi stole the brand back when Fidel Castro took over Cuba. So I was having some fun, and a natural search keyword, and yes, it can be more complicated, might be Havana Club. But darn it, I misspelled it when I first put it in and ran my search. And because Havana only has one N. But it turns out there are 4 documents in the 2 million that have 2 N's for Havana. Email misspelling, not bad. I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I just take those based on a bad search and sent them to Sherlock? What might Sherlock do? So I've sent the 4, you know how quickly it'll be. And sure enough, Sherlock cannot find another Havana with 2 N's, but it quickly starts to find other documents that are absolutely relevant to our investigation. And if I'd set up the investigation, these would all be in the folder. But notice that it's picked up all kinds of important terms that we would have struggled in the keyword world to go after. It realizes Bacardi is very important. Cuba export, patents, Melissa's Bush's assistant. Jorge is the CEO of Bacardi. And this is the power that algorithmic search can offer. It's not just a more like these, because it goes way beyond the words, and that's Sherlock 3. So Sherlock 4, or 3 or 4, is the last one I want to show. For our beta testers, I created a document called Meet Sherlock. We'll just have some fun with this, where I explain what's going on, how it works, and about the document population, including the NIST-based topics that I encouraged them to test on. You see Havana Club, that was one. Bottled water is interesting, but I picked another one the other day on felon disenfranchisement. And think of this in our legal world, we might call it a request for production of documents. Felon disenfranchisement, all documents concerning the right of felons to vote in Florida, including but not limited to voter purges and reinstatement of voter rights. And no, they don't want clemency cases. Those of you that are our keyword experts are probably already thinking, well, felons near Florida, near 5, quote, voter purges, reinstatement, and who knows what else you'd do. I think, wouldn't it be fun if I just copied this document request and I went back to Sherlock and said, let's do a new search. We built our own parser for Elastic, and one of the things we did was the square bracket. If I put a beginning and ending square bracket around anything that I want to paste in, it'll ignore the punctuation, it'll ignore any kind of non-standard stuff. And I can run a search and bring it back in relevance order. Now, here's something we also innovated from our investigators. You can look at the subject, but it's pretty hard to tell whether we've done well. So we also developed a snippet view, first I've seen of its kind, where we not only bring back the metadata fields you want, but also and I can hide this, bring back the guts of the document with highlighted information. So I'm going to be quick, but I can see felons not voting. I can see fact title to vote in all elections. I can see that this one's about felons. Yeah.
Yeah, so we only have a few more minutes left, and I see Paul has his hand up already. So I just want to make sure you leave some time for discussion too.
This is the last step, which is,
Okay, got it.
what if
Okay.
I could take those results and I could send them to Sherlock? I just picked 5. I could have picked 10 or 20 or 30 and said, Sherlock, I'm looking for these documents about felons. And voila, there you have it. We have expressing my feelings on felons voting. It's a tough issue, and we can continue on. Jeb Bush, voter registries, rights being restored, and the like. So I'm going to turn that off and open it up to questions.
Great.
But I don't see
thank you, John.
myself.
No, I see Paul and Bethany have their hands up. So maybe Paul, you want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, first of all, the technology seems pretty impressive. Those are pretty good results, pretty good timing. I had a follow-up question or two. One, do you integrate with other review platforms, or is it all using your review platform? And second question is, are there any low-level integrations, like from an API standpoint, that sort of thing?
Good questions. I'll try to get them all. I'll start at the other end, but I'll say by way of preference, I formed Merlin. We're about 15 developers, a scientist out of Melbourne, myself, and we're just moving toward a launch this fall. So I'm looking for guidance, advice, partners. We've had a number of beta players, including a major hospital chain. This is not just for legal, and a major government investigative Asian organization. I won't mention their name. Sherlock itself is a separate application. It is all built around APIs, containerized, so everything works out of an API, which means Sherlock could actually work with other systems that are hooked up to the API. That's how we build it. All of our components are API driven. So it's there. God, now I forgot your first 2 questions. Remind me again.
Well, it was if it could be hosted in any review platform, or if there were like plugins.
I'm not building this to plug it into the relativities or other products of the world, because I've built a full-blown review app that I think people are going to like a lot better. I mean, I built it 3 times at Catalyst. It was one of the best. I think we've solved problems I couldn't solve at Catalyst, and I think this is going to be powerful. But my big goal here is to take this way beyond legal. I think to all places where medical record searches, for example, and others. So yeah, it could be plugged in, but that's not where I'm focusing. And your first question?
That was it. I think you covered both of them. Thank you.
Great.
My
Then
pleasure.
Bethany, do you want to go next?
Yes, hello. Thank you for the talk, and both the technology
Sure.
and the program were really interesting. I think you might have already partially answered this in your last question, but AI and AI-based search programs are a fairly recent creation. I'm interested to hear how you see your program evolving, both as the demand and AI technology itself continues to change over, say, the next 5 to 10 years.
It's a great question. You know, I see this as a chance to change how search is done, which is why I've started using Search 2.0, and not just search in legal, but search in a wide variety of areas. So a world, I liken this to the camera, the rear view camera in a car. When I first got it, I was like, well, that's interesting, but I'm busy turning my head and looking out the mirrors, probably like everybody else. Now you can't live without it. Imagine a world where you can just put in a chunk of a document and have it search millions and go find things you're looking for. Will you ever go back to keyword search? My answer is sure you will, some, just like I look. But you'll never want a system that doesn't have a Sherlock built into it, is my view. And that's what got me going. At 68, I could have retired. And then I saw what we built and I said, there's a chance to really make a dent in the universe. What's more fun than that? So I'm open to all ideas, by the way. This is one of the first times I've actually shown it in public, although I've made a few movies about it and posted those.
Thank you.
All
Sure.
right, Pete. Peter has his hand up. Peter, you go ahead, please.
Yes, I think it was back
Hi,
in the
Peter.
I think back in the 1990s, Apple Computer had a search system interface that they called Sherlock. And I just wanted to ask whether you had any contact with them to make sure that as soon as you launch, you don't suddenly find Apple's lawyers breathing down your neck with trademark and related issues there.
It's a great question. We did notice that they'd had one a long time ago that they discontinued and dropped. Sherlock is a US registered trademark, and I've been through all those steps. No objections were filed. So maybe Apple would come sue me. They were my largest client at Catalyst. I hope not. I'm still friendly with them, and they know about Sherlock. But you know,
Maybe
we'll
they'll
see.
become a
But I have the
customer.
federal registration. Maybe.
Very encouraging. Also, I was wondering, do you have any kind of an API for developers to integrate with technology from other systems?
Everything here is built on an API. When my platform talks to Sherlock, it's only through a well-developed API. It sends IDs, tells how many back. 4 and 5 of Sherlock, which will be out in a couple of weeks, allows a review team to not just look at single documents, but to look at the next 20 and tag them quickly, or look at the next 50, which we cluster on the fly. And every bit of it's API calls. So yeah, Sherlock could be integrated with another product. And I'm not interested so much in doing that legal, where I spend all my time, but for the healthcare hospital chain we're working with and others, I think that can happen. It is a containerized, separate application, and that's part of the genius, I think, in which it was built, that I give credit to William Weber over in Melbourne and our development team. And those guys were with me at Catalyst for 10 plus years. So I got this experienced team, which is why we could do this in the space of a year.
Great. So
Or
we're
less.
already a bit over time, but Bruce has a question. Bruce, maybe you want to ask the last question?
Yeah, just real fast. This is really amazing, John.
Thank you.
As you're thinking about other use cases, think about history. I'm investigating the 100-year since the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre, and
Yeah.
processing through historical records this way would be amazing. So, kudos for doing it.
Thank you. I'm absolutely interested in, like any of these, the key is to get a population and to go at it. We're looking to do some of those as I build the company. I am not looking to raise money. It's not why I'm here. This is self-funded, but I am looking to really take search to another level in every possible field. So if you got ideas, I'm jt@merlin.tech, which is our website, also built by me on the videos. But now is when we're going to start adding people and bringing folks back.
All right. Well, wonderful. On that note, John, thank you so much for the update, and it's really impressive what you've built. And please keep us posted. And Siren, also thank you to you again for presenting. You both presenters really doing critical work in legal innovation. And so yes, so let's close here. We will be meeting next week. Susan, is there a meeting next week?
We're going to skip next week. It's a short week. So happy Labor Day to everybody here in the US. And we'll see you on September 16th.
September 16th. All right. Great. So then see you all soon. Thank you again. And yeah, quick round of applause for our speakers. And we'll all see you again soon. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.